The sea was a beast that night, restless, snarling, its black waves clawing at the hull of the marauder's revenge as if trying to drag it into the abyss. Above, the sky was a battlefield of storm clouds, lightning flickering like the dying embers of a god's wrath. At the helm stood Captain Kale's storm-fanged vein, his silhouette carved against the tempest, his dark coat whipping like the wings of a fallen angel. He was a man forged in salt and blood, his face a map of old battles. A scar split his left brow, and his beard, streaked with silver, spoke of years spent laughing in the face of death. His eyes, sharp as cut glass, gleamed with the cold hunger of a predator. Tonight, his crew had cast the Blackwater net, a monstrous weave of enchanted ropes meant to drag up creatures from the deep, rare fish, perhaps even a kraken spawn. Anything to sell, to trade, to survive. But the sea had other plans. When the net strained against the winch, groaning like a dying beast, the crew knew something was wrong. "Heave, damn you!" Kale roared, his voice cutting through the storm. Men scrambled, muscles burning as they hauled the net aboard, and then silence. There, tangled in the ropes, was no fish, no monster. A mermaid. She was all moonlight and shadow, her skin pale as sea foam, her hair a cascade of dark silk streaked with strands of blue, as if the ocean itself had painted her. Her tail, her tail, shimmered with scales like liquid silver, each one catching the lantern light in a hypnotic dance. But it was her eyes that froze Kale where he stood, wide, terrified, the color of storm-washed jade, holding depths no mortal man should dare to know. For a heartbeat, the world stilled. Then she moved. A thrash of her powerful tail sent two men sprawling. Another twist, and the net tore like spider silk. She was fast, unnaturally so, but Kale was faster. He lunged, his grip iron around her wrist. She gasped, her lips parting in a soundless cry, her body trembling like a bird caught in a snare. "Easy, little siren," he murmured, his voice rough but low, as if soothing a spooked horse. "I've no taste for mermaid flesh." Her breath hitched. "Liar," she whispered, her voice like the tide kissing the shore, soft, but with the promise of drowning. "All men lie." Kale smirked, though something in his chest tightened at the way she looked at him, not just with fear, but with something deeper. Recognition, as if she knew the weight of the ghosts he carried. Around them the crew muttered, some with greed, others with superstition. "She's worth a king's ransom," growled Harlock, his one good eye gleaming, "or she'll curse us all." Kale ignored them. His thumb brushed over the mermaid's wrist, softer than he intended, and he felt the rapid flutter of her pulse. She was afraid, and yet she did not pull away. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated, then spoke a word like a secret. "Lyora," a name fit for a queen of the waves. Kale exhaled, his grip loosening just enough to be gentle. "Well, Lyora," he said, "you're my guest now, and I don't let guests drown." Her gaze flickered, uncertain, searching. Then, with a voice barely louder than the wind, she whispered something that would haunt him long after the storm had passed. "You should have let me go, pirate. The sea always takes what it wants." And as the rain fell harder, as the ship groaned beneath them, Kale wondered, had he caught her? Or had she caught him? The brig of the marauder's revenge was a cage of shadows, the air thick with salt and the damp musk of old wood. A single lantern swung from the ceiling, casting flickering gold across the water-filled chamber where Laura floated, her tail curled beneath her like a wounded serpent. The chains around her wrists were unnecessary. She could no more escape this prison than the moon could flee the sky. But it wasn't the iron that bound her, it was the silence. She refused to speak, refused to even look at him. Kale stood at the edge of the wooden platform that overlooked her makeshift cell, arms crossed, watching. He had expected screams, curses. Not this, quiet. It unnerved him more than any storm. "You'll rot in there if you keep this up," he said, voice rough as barnacled stone. Lyra's gills flared once, the only sign she'd heard him. Her eyes stayed fixed on the water's surface, where the reflection of the lantern danced like a trapped star. Harlock spat over the railing. "Waste of time. Cut a scale off her. See if that loosens her tongue." Kale's fingers twitched toward the knife at his belt, but then Leora moved. Slowly, so slowly she lifted her gaze to his, and in those depths, Kale saw something that made his breath hitch, not fear. Challenge. Her lips parted, and then she sang. It was a sound like nothing he had ever heard, not the sweet lullabies of tavern wenches, nor the shanties roared by drunken sailors. This was the voice of the sea itself, low, mournful, weaving through the air like a ghostly hand sliding down a lover's spine. The crew stilled. One man dropped his sword. Another swayed, eyes glazing over as if drunk on honey wine. Kale's pulse roared in his ears. He had heard tales of mermaids luring men to their deaths, but this was different. This wasn't seduction. It was fury. The ship groaned as the waves outside grew taller, slamming against the hull with unnatural force. The lantern's light guttered, plunging the brig into near darkness. Still, Lyra sang, her voice rising, twisting, becoming a thing of teeth and claws. Harlock stumbled forward, one step, then another, toward the edge, toward her. Kale moved without thinking, his hand clamped over Leora's mouth, cutting off the song mid-note. The sudden silence was deafening. Enough, he growled. Her breath came fast against his palm. Her eyes burned into his, not with fear now, but something hotter, something that made his grip tighten for reasons he couldn't name. Around them, the crew blinked as if waking from a dream. Harlock staggered back from the railing, face pale. Which? He rasped. Lyra pulled away from Kale's touch, her lips curling. You brought this upon yourselves, she whispered. The sea does not forgive, and neither do I. Kale studied her, the way her chest rose and fell, the way her fingers trembled even as her voice stayed steady. She was afraid, but she was also something else. Something that called to the part of him that still remembered what it was to be more than a thief, more than a killer. He crouched at the edge of the platform, close enough to see the flecks of gold in her green eyes. What do you want? He asked, voice low. For a moment, she just looked at him, then so quiet he almost missed it. To go home. The words hummed between them, fragile as sea foam. Kale exhaled. He had no reason to care, no reason at all. And yet, then sing for me again, he murmured, but this time, make it a bargain, not a threat. Her gaze flickered, uncertain, searching. Outside, the storm raged on. But in that moment, in the dim glow of the dying lantern, something quieter, something far more dangerous, began to stir. The sea had teeth tonight. They gnashed against the hull of the Marauder's Revenge, sending tremors through the wood like the heartbeat of some great, angry beast. Above deck, men scrambled to secure ropes and sails, their shouts swallowed by the howling wind. But below, in the belly of the ship where the air tasted of damp and desperation, only two souls existed, a pirate and a mermaid, bound by something deeper than chains. Kale braced himself against the wall as the ship lurched, his boots slipping on wet planks. The lantern swung wildly, throwing jagged shadows across Leora's face. She floated perfectly still in her prison, her silver blue tail coiled beneath her, eyes reflecting the storm's fury. You did this, he accused, though there was no real anger in his voice, only wonder. Leora's lips curved, just slightly. The ocean answers when I call. Another wave struck, sending a shudder through the ship. Somewhere above, a mast cracked like thunder. Kale stumbled forward, catching himself on the edge of her cell. Their faces were close now, close enough to share breath, if either dared. Call it off, he demanded. Or what? Her voice was a whisper, softer than the foam on a cresting wave. You'll throw me overboard? Cut out my tongue. Her fingers brushed the surface of the water, sending ripples between them. You could have done that already. Kale's jaw tightened. She was right, and they both knew it. Something stayed his hand whenever he looked at her, something that had nothing to do with gold or glory. The ship groaned around them. Timbers protested. The storm was winning. What do you want? He asked again, voice rough with salt and something like surrender. Leora studied him, the scar cutting through his brow, the way his damp shirt clung to shoulders that had borne too many burdens. When she spoke, her words were measured, deliberate. Free me, and I will calm the seas. A laugh burst from Kale's chest, harsh and humorless. You think me a fool? The moment you're overboard, you'll vanish into the depths. Her hand rose from the water, droplets tracing paths down her wrist like tiny rivers. She didn't touch him, but the air between them grew heavy all the same. Then come with me. The words hung there, impossible. Kale's breath caught. He imagined it. The cool embrace of the waves, the weightlessness of surrender, her body moving through the water beside his like two strands of seaweed entwined. The ship lurched violently, throwing him forward. His knees hit the platform's edge, his face now level with hers. Her scent filled his nose, salt, and something sweet, like the first breeze after a hurricane. You're mad, he murmured, but his fingers found the key at his belt anyway. The lock clicked open. For a heartbeat, neither moved. The chain slithered from Leora's wrists like sea snakes retreating. She rubbed the red marks they left behind, her eyes never leaving his. Swear it, Kale growled. Swear you won't drown us all the moment you're free. Leora's fingers brushed his, just once, feather light. I swear on the bones of the first tide. It was an oath he didn't understand, but the weight behind it settled in his chest like an anchor finding its rest. Above them, the storm reached a crescendo. Wood screamed. Men shouted. Then do it, he said. Leora took a deep breath, her gills flaring. When she sang this time, it was not the jagged, furious melody from before, but something older, something that spoke of moonlit coves and the quiet hush of waves against sand. The very air seemed to still. Kale felt it in his bones, the moment the sea listened. The ship's violent rocking eased. The wind's howl softened to a sigh. Through a crack in the hull, he watched the waves grow calm, their peaks smoothing like wrinkles on a sheet being pulled taut. Silence fell, heavy and strange. Leora's song faded. She looked at him, her chest rising and falling rapidly, her hair clinging to her neck in damp tendrils. Your turn, she whispered. Kale exhaled. Then, before he could second-guess himself, he scooped her into his arms, her body cool and surprisingly light against his, and carried her up to the deck. The crew froze as they emerged. Harlock's hand went to his sword, but one look from Kale stayed him. The moon had broken through the clouds, painting everything in silver. Leora's scales shimmered like 1,000 tiny mirrors as Kale stepped to the railing. For a moment he hesitated. Her fingers curled into his shirt. Not to push away, to pull closer. You'll come back, he said. It wasn't a question. Leora's gaze held his. Then, with a smile that held all the mystery of the deep, she whispered, Find me. And with that, she slipped from his arms into the waiting sea. The water swallowed her without a splash. Kale stood there long after the ripples faded, the salt air drying on his skin, the ghost of her touch still burning where she'd been. Dawn painted the horizon in bleeding gold when the Marauder's Revenge cut through the glassy waters toward the forbidden place. The crew moved like ghosts, their usual roughhousing silenced by the unnatural calm. Even the gulls had abandoned them. Only the whisper of waves against wood broke the stillness. That and the quiet tap of Kale's fingers against the ship's wheel as he scanned the mist-shrouded coastline ahead. You're certain this is it? Harlock's voice rasped from the shadows, his one good eye squinting at the jagged cliffs rising from the sea. Kale didn't answer. He didn't need to. The map burned against his chest where it lay hidden beneath his shirt, its edges frayed from years of secret study. The island matched every description, the twin peaks like broken teeth, the unnatural glow beneath the waves where coral grew in spirals no human hand could carve, and the silence, the terrible, waiting silence. A splash broke his thoughts. Near the bow, something pale flickered beneath the surface. His pulse jumped before he could stop it. She kept her word. Leora emerged like a dream-given form, her hair clinging to bare shoulders where the water hadn't yet slid away. Moonlight clung to her differently now, not as something that illuminated, but as something that revealed. The curve of her collarbone, the way her gills fluttered when she breathed, the impossible blue of her eyes, deeper than any ocean he'd sailed. You came, she said, and the words carried across the still air like a secret passed between lovers. Kale's grip tightened on the wheel. You knew I would. Her smile was a knife turned gentle. I know many things, pirate. The crew shifted uneasily. Harlock spat over the railing. Devil's work, he muttered. We shouldn't. Quiet. Kale's voice cut through the protest. His boots thudded against the deck as he approached the rail, the wood groaning beneath his weight. Up close, he could see the new scars on Leora's arms, thin, silvery lines that hadn't been there before. His thumb twitched with the urge to trace them, to demand who had dared. She noticed his stare. The sea takes its toll, she murmured, sinking deeper until only her eyes remained above the surface. As will this place. A chill walked down Kale's spine. Then why lead us here? Leora's fingers broke the surface, droplets falling like liquid stars. Between them, she held something, a spiral shell, its interior glowing faintly pink. Because some treasures are worth the price. The shell pulsed as she pressed it into his palm. His skin burned where they touched. Follow the light, she whispered. But heed this, when the siren offers you a choice, remember, not all chains are made of iron. Before he could demand answers, she was gone, her tail flicking once as she vanished into the dark water. The shell in his hand grew warmer. On the shore, the mist parted. The crew gasped as the island revealed its true face. A cavern mouth yawning black beneath the cliffs, water lapping at its edges like a hungry tongue. From within came a sound that was neither wave nor wind, but something older, something waiting. The shell's glow intensified, painting Kale's face in eerie light. Harlock made the sign of the evil eye. That's no natural cave. Kale pocketed the shell, its heat seeping through fabric to brand his thigh. Lower the boats. As the men scrambled to obey, he stared at the spot where Leora had disappeared. The water showed no sign of her passage, but the shell pulsed against his leg like a second heartbeat. A promise. A warning. And perhaps, though he dared not speak it, a farewell. The first oars hit the water as the mist closed behind them, swallowing the ship whole. The rowboat scraped against submerged stone as they entered the cavern, the sound echoing like bones rattling in a coffin. Kale's fingers curled around the glowing shell, its pulsing light painting the dripping walls in shades of dying coral. The air smelled of wet earth and something older, salt that had lingered for centuries, whispers trapped in stone. Shouldn't have come, Harlock muttered behind him, his knife glinting in the eerie glow. The other two crewmen rowed in silence, their knuckles white on the oars. The shell grew hotter in Kale's palm. Leora's words haunted him. When the siren offers you a choice. He touched the pistol at his belt, its weight suddenly insignificant against the ancient dread coiling in his gut. Then the singing began. Not from ahead, from below. The water itself seemed to hum, vibrations traveling up through the boat's hull to settle in their bones. One of the crewmen gasped as bioluminescent tendrils blew beneath them, swirling in patterns that made the eyes ache to follow. Don't look, Kale snapped, but it was too late. The man closest to the edge leaned over, entranced. His fingers skimmed the glowing water, and something pale shot up from the depths. A hand, skeletal but fleshed, its fingers too long, nails curved like fishhooks. It seized the sailor's wrist and yanked. The scream was cut short as the sea swallowed him whole. Chaos erupted. Harlock slashed at the water, his curses bouncing off the cavern walls. The remaining crewmen scrambled backward, nearly capsizing the boat. Kale drew his pistol, but there was nothing to shoot, only ripples where the man had been. The singing grew louder. From the darkness ahead, a shape emerged. Not a monster, a throne. Carved from a single mass of coral, its spires twisted upward like frozen waves, encrusted with pearls that gleamed like eyes in the shell's light. And upon it, well, purred a voice like drowning. What ties have washed you ashore? She was beautiful in the way shipwrecks were beautiful, all shattered elegance and tragic grandeur. Her hair floated around her in a dark halo, strands moving as if suspended in water though the air was still. Gills fluttered along her neck, and when she smiled, her teeth were needle-sharp. The siren. Harlock made a choked sound. The last crewman began to weep. Kale forced air into his lungs. I seek the siren's tear. Laughter filled the cavern, bouncing off the walls until it came from everywhere at once. The siren, Morvina. The name came to him suddenly, leaned forward, her bare chest barely concealed by strands of black pearls. Oh, Stormfang, you already carry it. His hand flew to the shell in his pocket. Morvena's grin widened. Not that trinket. With a flick of her wrist, the water beside the throne parted, revealing a glassy pool. Images swirled beneath its surface. Leora, swimming through moonlit waters. Leora, singing to the stars. Leora, her hands pressed against some invisible barrier, her mouth forming his name. She is the last of her kind, Morvena whispered. Her voice contains the power you seek. One kiss, and it would be yours to command. The words hung in the air like poison. Kale's pulse roared. What's the catch? Morvena's tail, black as oil, shimmering with unnatural rainbows, slid through the water toward him. Take her voice, and she remains here forever. Leave it, and the sea claims you instead. Her smile turned pitying. A fair trade, no? Harlock grabbed Kale's arm. Take the wench's voice and let's go. The pool's image shifted. Lyra now floated in a cage of living coral, her eyes wide with fear. Waiting. Always waiting. Kale's fingers brushed the pistol again. Then, slowly, he reached into his pocket and drew out the shell Lyra had given him. It pulsed wildly, as if sensing its mistress's distress. Morvena's amusement faded. Choose, pirate. The cavern held its breath. Kale looked at the shell, at the pool, at the terrified crewman. Then he threw the shell at Morvena's throne. It shattered against the coral, releasing a burst of searing light. The siren shrieked, her form distorting as the cavern trembled. Stalactites rained down. The pool's surface cracked. Run! Kale grabbed Harlock as the boat rocked violently. They barely made it out as the entrance collapsed behind them, the sea churning as if in agony. Gasping, they hauled themselves onto the beach where the others waited. The crew erupted in questions. Kale ignored them, his eyes scanning the waves. Nothing. Then, a familiar silver-blue flicker in the shallows. Leora emerged just enough to meet his gaze, her expression unreadable. Behind her, the ruins of the cavern sank beneath the waves. Harlock spat. What now? The sea was a mirror of shattered silver when the black sails appeared on the horizon. Kale knew those sails. Every scar on his body knew them. Harlock cursed, scrambling to load the cannons. How'd he find us? Kale didn't answer. His fingers brushed the empty space where Leora's shell had rested in his pocket. Perhaps the sea itself had betrayed them, or perhaps some debts could only be paid in blood. The first cannonball tore through the deck with a scream of splintered wood. Chaos erupted. Men shouted. Smoke stunned the air. Kale roared orders, his voice raw against the thunder of battle. But even as he fought, his gaze kept drifting to the water, searching. She wouldn't come. She couldn't. Another blast rocked the ship. Flames licked up the mast, painting everything in hellish orange. Through the smoke, Kale saw him, Dane, standing tall on his deck, his uniform crisp despite the carnage, his smile visible even across the distance. Years of rage boiled up like a geyser. Kale grabbed a fallen sword. Then the sea began to glow. At first, no one noticed. Then a crewman pointed, his voice shrill with terror. The deep? Look to the deep. Beneath the waves, blue light swirled like liquid stars, forming patterns that made the heart stutter. The water itself seemed to breathe, rising and falling in time to some ancient rhythm. Kale's pulse roared in his ears. Her. Lyra burst from the waves in a shower of luminescent spray, her tail whipping the air as she twisted to avoid cannon fire. But she wasn't alone. Shapes moved beneath her, shadows with glowing eyes and webbed hands. Her people. The merfolk attacked. They dragged men from the decks, their songs turning to war cries. Dane's smug expression shattered as his crew floundered. Kale didn't hesitate. He leaped onto the railing, sword raised, just as the world exploded. Fire, heat, pain. The blast sent him flying. The last thing he saw before the water claimed him was Leora's face, her mouth open in a soundless scream, her hand reaching as if she could catch him across the distance. Then darkness. Cold. Pressure. Something wrapped around his waist. When Kale opened his eyes, he was moving through liquid blue, the surface growing further with each heartbeat. Leora's arms held him tight, her hair floating around them like a shroud. Blood curled from his side in crimson tendrils. He tried to speak. Bubbles escaped. Leora pressed her forehead to his, her gills flaring rapidly. Her eyes said everything her voice could not. Stay with me. Don't let go. Not yet. The deeper they went, the heavier Kale's limbs became. His lungs burned. Spots danced at the edges of his vision. Leora's grip tightened. Then, with a suddenness that startled him, she pressed her lips to his. Salt. Sweetness. Air. Kale gasped as oxygen flooded his chest, miraculous and impossible. When she pulled back, her eyes held galaxies. Around them, the water shimmered. Shapes emerged from the gloom. Merfolk, dozens of them, their expressions unreadable as they encircled the pair. One, an elder with a crown of twisted coral, pointed upward urgently. Leora shook her head, clutching Kale closer. The elder gestured again, more insistent. A silent argument passed between them. Then, with obvious reluctance, Leora began to ascend. The surface came in bursts of light and agony. Kale coughed up seawater on a half-sunken piece of wreckage, his body racked with shivers. Beside him, Leora hauled herself up, her tail flicking water droplets that caught the sunlight like scattered diamonds. Wide, he rasped, his voice ruined by salt and smoke. Leora touched the wound at his side, her fingers coming away red. When she met his eyes, hers were full of storm and sorrow. The answer came not in words, but in the way her hand lingered over his heart, in the way her breath hitched when he caught her wrist, in the way the distance between them felt like the only wound that wouldn't heal. A shout rang out across the water. Dane's ship, though damaged, still floated, and now its remaining cannons turned toward them. Leora's head snapped up. Her lips parted in a silent snarl. Kel tried to stand, but his legs betrayed him. Go, he choked. You have to. She kissed him again. This one tasted like goodbye. Then she was gone, diving beneath the waves as the first cannonball arced overhead. The explosion never came. Instead, the sea itself rose up, a wall of water taller than any ship, curling like a fist around the iron tide. For one breathless moment, the ship hung suspended. Then the waves clenched. Wood shattered. Men screamed. When the water settled, only flotsam remained. Kale stared at the carnage, his heart pounding. Somewhere beneath those waves, Leora had saved him. Again. And as the current carried him toward shore, as darkness crept into the edges of his vision, he made a silent vow. This debt would be paid, no matter the cost. The cave smelled of salt and secrets. Kale woke to the drip of water on stone, his body racked with pain. His fingers brushed the crude bandages wrapped around his ribs, seaweed and woven kelp, still damp against his feverish skin. He tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness forced him back down. She shouldn't have brought you here. The voice came from the shadows. An old merman emerged, his scales dull with age, his beard made of living coral that pulsed faintly with blue light. His eyes, milky with cataracts, saw too much. Where is she? Kale's voice came out cracked, like driftwood underfoot. The elder didn't answer. Instead, he placed a gnarled hand on Kale's chest, right over the wound. The sea claims what it's owed, Stormfang. Your life for hers. A chill ran through Kale that had nothing to do with the cave's damp air. What do you mean? A splash echoed from deeper in the cavern. Then, Leora. But not the Leora he knew. She moved slowly, her tail dragging where it usually glided. Dark circles bruised the delicate skin beneath her eyes. When she saw him awake, her lips parted, but no sound came out. Kale's heart stuttered. Your voice. The elder nodded grimly. The price was paid. Her psalm for your breath. Leora floated closer, her fingers brushing Kale's where they lay trembling against the stone. Her touch was ice and fire all at once. No. Kale surged upright, ignoring the agony in his side. Take it back. Give her. It cannot be undone. The elder's voice was final as a tomb ceiling. The magic is old, older than your kind, older than ours. Leora shook her head, her eyes full of things she could no longer say. She touched her throat, then pressed her palm flat against Kale's chest, right over his pounding heart. You're worth it. The words hung between them louder than any shout. Kale grabbed her wrist, his grip desperate. There has to be another way. The elder sighed. There is one path, but you will not like it. Outside, the tide turned. The cave groaned in response, water lapping higher against the stone. Leora's fingers tightened around Kale's. The elder continued, she may regain her voice, if you never see her again. The words landed like cannon fire. Kale's breath left him in a rush. What? The magic demands balance. Her voice returns when your paths diverge forever. The elder's milky eyes seemed to pierce right through him. Stay, and she remains silent. Leave, and she sings again. Leora's grip on Kale's hand became crushing. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the relentless drip of water. Kale studied her face, the curve of her cheek he traced in dreams, the freckle beneath her left eye that appeared only in sunlight, the way her lashes fluttered when she fought tears. He'd known her for mere weeks. It felt like lifetimes. Leora, he whispered. She pressed her forehead to his, her breath warm against his lips. When she pulled back, her eyes held an entire ocean of sorrow. Then she reached into the kelp pouch at her waist and withdrew a single perfect pearl. It glowed faintly, pulsing in time with Kale's heartbeat. The elder inhaled sharply. Her soul pearl. She offers you a piece of herself. Kale's throat closed. I can't. Leora pressed the pearl into his palm and folded his fingers around it. Warmth spread up his arm, settling deep in his bones. When he looked up, tears traced silver paths down her cheeks. The elder turned away, giving them this moment. Kale pulled her close, his nose brushing the sensitive skin behind her ear where her gills fluttered. I'll find you, he murmured, the words of vow. In this life or the next. Lyra trembled against him. Then, with obvious effort, she pulled back and touched two fingers to his lips. Goodbye. The tide surged, filling the cave with swirling foam. When it receded, she was gone. Only the pearl remained, pulsing softly in Kale's grip. A heartbeat without a body, a song without a voice, a love story already slipping through his fingers like seawater. Outside, the first birds of dawn began to sing. And somewhere beneath the waves, so did she. Years passed like waves against stone, slow, inevitable, wearing everything down to smooth edges. Kale stood at the prow of his new ship, the Mermaid's ghost, his hands rough with salt and time. The pearl hung around his neck on a leather cord, its glow dimmer now but still pulsing, still warm against his skin. He'd searched every cove, every hidden bay. He followed whispers of mermaid sightings until they led nowhere. He drank with sailors who claimed to have seen her, a flash of silver tail near the southern reefs, a haunting song near the black cliffs. But none could tell him more. The crew knew better than to speak of it. They saw the way their captain stared at the horizon, his eyes older than his years. They heard him whisper to the pearl on stormy nights, words lost beneath the thunder. Tonight, the sea was calm, too calm. The full moon painted a silver road across the water, leading to nowhere and everywhere at once. Kale traced the pearl's surface with his thumb, the way he'd once traced the curve of Leora's cheek. Then, a ripple where there should be none. Kale stilled. The water shimmered. A shadow moved beneath the surface, too large for a fish, too graceful for a shark. His pulse roared in his ears. Lower the sails, he ordered, his voice rough with something more than salt. The crew exchanged glances but obeyed. The ship slowed, then stopped, rocking gently on the glassy sea. Kale climbed onto the railing, the pearl burning against his chest. Leora? The name hung in the air like a prayer. For a long moment, nothing. Then, she broke the surface in a shower of moonlit droplets, her hair longer now, her face more weathered but her eyes exactly as he remembered, storm and sea and secrets. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The years fell away as Kale stepped off the ship into the warm embrace of the sea. The water closed over his head, and for the first time in too long, he felt peace. Leora's arms wrapped around him, her tail brushing his legs as she pulled him deeper. Around them, bioluminescent fish darted like living stars, painting the water in blues and greens. She touched the pearl at his throat, then pressed her palm over his heart. When she smiled, it held all the sorrow and joy of ties that had pulled them apart and brought them back together. Kale cupped her face, his calloused thumbs brushing the delicate gills at her neck. Her skin was just as he remembered, cool and soft, alive with the ocean's rhythm. Above them, the crew of the Mermaid's ghosts gathered at the railing, their shouts muffled by the water. Leora glanced upward, then back at Kale, her brow furrowed. He shook his head. Let them wait. Let them wonder. For now, there was only this, the weightlessness, the quiet, the way her body fit against his as if the sea itself had carved them from the same piece of driftwood. Leora pressed her forehead to his, her hair floating around them like a veil. When she pulled back, her lips formed silent words he felt more than heard. Stay. Kale exhaled, bubbles rushing upward toward a world that no longer held him. He touched the pearl, then let it go, letting it sink into the dark where it belonged. When he kissed her, the ocean sighed around them. And as the last bubbles of his breath rose toward the surface, as the crew's cries grew frantic above, Kale knew one truth with absolute certainty. Some loves were too vast for land. Some hearts could only beat beneath the waves. The sea had claimed them both at last, and it would never let go.